Zealand is starting to count the cost of the magnitude 7.5 earthquake that rocked the upper part of the South Island early on Monday. More than 1,000 tourists are stranded in a small town without power or sewerage systems. The official death toll still stands at 2. The economic cost is expected to run into the billions of dollars because of the structural damage to road and rail links.
Stranded on a tiny island in a broken landscape, these cattle symbolic of the earthquake devastation in New Zealand's Upper South Island. Only 2 people have died, despite the many dozens of homes and buildings destroyed by one of the biggest quakes in New Zealand history that's left hundreds homeless.
Some very short-term practical issues that need to be resolved, making sure that we get more water, food and ultimately people in here to support the nearly 600 people that are at the welfare centre, because the road access points here are blocked off. The only way through is flying people in and out.
Major road and rail links have been swept away by massive coastal slips, which will take months to clear and cost billions of dollars to repair or replace. The Upper South Island is a popular tourist area, and many visitors found themselves stuck with nowhere to go.
Caravan started shaking, we wake up with a big fright, what's going on? Look outside, see the cars moving around.
The most urgent problem is the evacuation of around 1,200 tourists trapped in the small whale-watching town of Kaikoura, which has been cut off by slips.
Get me out. It's hard. Sorry.
With power and sewerage cut and drinking water in short supply, there's a real risk of health problems. A Navy ship is expected in the area tomorrow to help evacuate stranded tourists, and military helicopters are also being used to get people out.
We're standing here in the Papatea Fault, a few kilometres south of the Clarence River Bridge on the Kaikoura coast. Looking here at the fault plane, the plane of movement along the fault itself, where this side here has moved up by about 1.5 metres, and we can see the gravels here and the gravels on that side. But what's really interesting is that we can see lines of movement here on this fault plane which are moving down a little bit in this fashion. And that means we can see, it looks impressive that we're standing here 1.5 metres high, but in fact most of the movement has been along a plane something like this. So this side here has moved forwards by many, many metres. These fault scarps form very, very quickly, and we know from earthquake physics that probably this fault scarp ruptured across here at a speed of about 3 kilometres a second. So this has uplifted a very large area of new reef here, and the locals here describe not the earthquake noise, but the noise of water running off the top of this uplifted platform here. They said that the noise was just horrendous. And on this side, on the downthrown side of the fault, it's actually still even come up by about 1.5 metres. On the other side, there's as much as 6 metres of uplift.
There is a new report out from Food Democracy Now! And the Detox Project, and they have found alarming levels of the chemical glyphosate. Now, the report says glyphosate is in many of America's most popular foods. Folks, this is a weed killer, glyphosate, and it was classified by the World Health Organization as a probable human carcinogen. Joining me now to talk about this is Dave Murphy. He is founder and executive director at Food Democracy Now!, who issued the report. Dave, good to have you on tonight. Tell us, how dangerous is glyphosate? How dangerous is it?
Sure. Well, listen, glyphosate, it's the main ingredient, chemical ingredient in Roundup, Monsanto's best-selling weed killer Roundup. And the issue is that the glyphosate use has exploded in the last 20 years because farmers in the U.S. and around the world have adopted genetically engineered crops, Roundup-ready crops that are engineered to survive being sprayed with large amounts of glyphosate, this weed killer. The problem really is, and we found this in these studies, we really had no idea where we were going to find it or how much we were going to find, but it's very shocking that the highest level that we found is in Cheerios, General Mills Cheerios, which is one of the first cereals that a mother feeds their child at between ages 6 months and a year. And those levels found in Cheerios, which are 1,125.3 parts per billion, are simply off the charts. And the question really is, what is the U.S. government doing to protect the American people? And the quick answer to that is it appears not much, unfortunately.
I mean, this week, the brightest moon in almost 69 years is lighting up the skies all around the globe, and a lot of people are talking about it. The supermoon has captivated the world's attention. It's also triggering flooding in a preview of sea level rise along the East Coast. RT's Marina Portnaya brings us the details tonight from Miami.
As the world has been looking up to gaze at the extra bright supermoon, those living in South Florida, they're seeing something else. Significant flooding brought on by unusual high tides. Since Monday, streets and parking lots in low-lying neighborhoods have been inundated with ocean water. Experts say the supermoon's stronger gravitational pull is amplifying the seasonal king tide, creating heightened flood risks. Earlier this week, the Weather Service said tidal levels were running about a foot above normal due to the occurrence of the supermoon, a rare astronomical event not seen since 1948. Some say the flooding sparked by the supermoon offers a glimpse of the sea level rise coastal cities like Miami are battling as a result of climate change.
The world is set for a new heat record in 2016 following sizzling temperatures last year. But talks at the current climate change conference in Marrakesh are being overshadowed by Donald Trump's election. The US president-elect has called climate change a hoax and is reportedly seeking ways to pull the US out of the 2015 Paris Agreement.
I don't really want to speculate on what the new guys would do, but in every agreement there are provisions for how a person or a country might withdraw from it, and there are the same in this one. The new administration may look at the commitment globally, at the interest globally in the issue, and decide how it can move forward in ways that are consistent with its own policies. We'll have to wait and see.
The Paris deal, backed by almost 200 nations, including the United States, has a goal of limiting the rise in temperatures to below 2 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial revolution levels by cutting down on the use of planet-warming greenhouse gases from burning fossil fuels. But this year, experts are not optimistic.
And it's likely that we are going to reach this year 1.2 degree warming level, and we are going to a bit the wrong direction if we think of this 1.5 degree warming level, which was agreed last year in Paris.
The heat, which triggers melting polar ice, was also stoked by an El Nino weather event. It means, along with a new resident in the White House, climate expert concerns are on the rise.
Sea ice at both poles is at record lows for this time of year. That might not sound surprising, but it's actually a first. While ice levels in the Arctic have been fairly consistently declining year after year, the Antarctic hasn't seen the same decline. In fact, the amount of Antarctic sea ice hit record highs each year between 2012 and 2014. Of course, it's hard to compare the Arctic with the Antarctic. They're always in opposite seasons and have different geographies. And it's too soon to tell if the sudden decline in sea ice around Antarctica is going to become the norm. We'll need a couple more years of data for that. But sea ice decline is still bad news for humans. Major winter storms and strong cold snaps are just a few of the consequences.
The World Health Organization has declared that Zika no longer constitutes an international emergency, but it stressed the need for a long-term effort to address the virus. WHO is quick to note that the move does not mean the agency is downgrading the threat of the virus, but some public health experts worried that losing the international emergency label could slow research into the virus, which continues to cause infections. Nearly 30 countries have reported birth defects linked to Zika, with over 2,100 cases of neurosystem malformations reported in Brazil alone. Hong Kong, Vietnam and Thailand continue to report cases of Zika, while Cambodia confirmed its first case of infection on Friday.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and US President-elect Donald Trump have agreed to end economic ties between their countries. The two spoke on the phone on Monday and discussed a host of issues. Putin said Moscow is willing to communicate better with the new US administration. They also discussed Syria and counter-terrorism efforts.
Well, China's leader has called Donald Trump to congratulate him on winning the presidential election and to offer him a little advice on trade. Now, we'll never know the exact tone of the call, although Trump's spokesman says the two men did show mutual respect. But consider this. Trump has for months criticised and threatened China because he believes when it comes to trade, China cheats. Is it all about to get very serious, as our Sukri reports?
Donald Trump rode to victory in the race to the White House partly on his promise to get tough on China. Over the course of the campaign, he repeatedly hammered home the message that he would punish it for underpricing its goods. One of the measures he's proposed is levying a punitive 45% tax on Chinese imports.
We have a $500 billion deficit, trade deficit with China. We're going to turn it around. And we have the cards. Don't forget, we're like the piggy bank that's being robbed. We have the cards. We have a lot of power with China.
The actual figure is rather different. America's trade deficit with China was about half that amount, coming in at $258 billion for the first 9 months of this year. While still large, that's down 6.3% from the same period in 2015. Now that Trump has won, both sides are sounding rather more conciliatory.
कुछ नहीं है ट्राई कर लो आप घर पर आर पेटी पूर बना 5 बजे तो ढाई की बेटा
हमारे यहाँ कम से कम 25-30 गांव इस गांव से अटैच हैं
These are the first few people being let into the bank now that it's open, a few at a time. And this after they've been standing in queue for 5 hours. Now, at the moment, they can only take their old rupee notes and deposit them. They're getting nothing in return because the bank doesn't have a supply of the new notes. And that's a real problem for these people because they desperately need their cash today.
अभी रेमिटेंस नहीं मिला है रेमिटेंस की प्रॉब्लम चल रही है करेंसी जैसे ही आएगी हम पेमेंट कर रहे हैं पिछले 2 दिन से पेमेंट किया हमने कंटिन्यू
छोरी को काल ब्याह है 16 तारीख को अब मैं पैसा की जरूरत की खातिर आया हूँ जगह मैं बैंक के मायने हर आदमी बोलो कि जमा करा दे जो तुम मिल जाए जमा करा दिया मंदिर को
अब क्या करा कोई गल्लो बताओ मिल जाता जने तो चाह चीनी राटो चुन लिया जाता हमारे कुआ खेती थोड़ी जो क्यों वापस गया मोल का लिया खावा 1 किलो आटा खेली वाला हमें तो
Germany's auto giant Volkswagen and its labor unions have agreed to 30,000 job cuts by the end of year 2020. The two sides have been hammering at the pact since June. The agreement is said to be part of a plan to boost profitability and fund projects to develop electric and self-driving cars after its emissions scandal. The automaker says the pact foresees 3.7 billion euros in annual savings at Volkswagen's namesake brand. The Volkswagen brand is expected to create 9,000 new jobs, mainly at factories in Germany.
Authorities in France have arrested 7 men and say they foiled a terror plot which was envisaged for some time. Bernard Cazeneuve, the country's interior minister, did not reveal the site of the planned attack, but said an anti-terrorist operation led by the General Directorate for Internal Security under the authority of the judiciary took place overnight between Saturday and Sunday in Marseille and Strasbourg. It led to the arrest of 7 people aged between 29 and 37 of French, Moroccan and Afghan nationalities. Most of the arrested suspects are said to have come from Strasbourg, but the city and its famous Christmas market are not reported to have been the target of the planned attack. France remains in a state of emergency following last year's Paris attacks, which left 130 people dead.
President Vladimir Putin says Russia is developing new weapons to ensure a global strategic balance. Putin said his country is working on state-of-the-art, weapon technologies such as laser, hypersonic and robotic weapons. He added that strategic balance has allowed the world to avoid large-scale military conflicts, and any attempts to upset it can be extremely dangerous. Putin also stressed Russia's efforts to efficiently neutralize any military threat to Russia. Moscow's relations with the West have been seriously damaged over the crises in Ukraine and Syria. NATO's US-led missile system and Washington's attempts to develop prompt global strike have been considered among major threats against Russia's security. Prompt global strike refers to prospective weapons systems that would be able to deliver a precision strike anywhere in the world within 1 hour.
Russia says it has launched a large-scale operation to deliver airstrikes against terrorists in the Syrian provinces of Idlib and Homs.
We continue to support the Syrian armed forces in the fight against terrorism, and in accordance with these tasks, today we launched a large-scale operation to defeat en masse the positions of ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra in the Idlib and Homs provinces. This operation involves the Admiral Grigorovich. Today it launched cruise missiles on predetermined and explored targets.
Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said that jets from the Admiral Kuznetsov aircraft carrier are involved in the operation for the first time. The warship is located off Syria's coast in the Mediterranean. Shoigu stressed that the airstrikes are targeting ammunition depots, terrorist training camps and arms factories. Russian jets have been striking terrorists across Syria at the request of Damascus since September 30, 2015.
The World Health Organization is condemning a wave of attacks on hospitals in Syria. Airstrikes reportedly pounded neighborhoods around a children's hospital and a blood bank in rebel-held Eastern Aleppo on Wednesday. It's part of a renewed wave of bombing that's killed more than 30 people, according to various sources. The WHO says there have been heavy attacks on 5 hospitals in Aleppo and Idlib since Sunday.
The little boy is told by his big sister not to be afraid. But their faces can't hide the fear, the pain, or the dread of knowing their family is buried under the rubble. Rescuers frantically look for survivors amid the haze of dust, debris, and the usual lingering smell of explosives. The girl in the Al-Firdaus neighborhood says her brothers are still there. They were in the balcony, she tells her grandfather. Hundreds of the nearly 3,000 residents of Aleppo have been killed since Tuesday, and Syrian government forces resumed intense airstrikes and artillery attacks. One sibling is rescued from the house, but it's not clear how or where he'll be treated. The World Health Organization says there are no hospitals left in eastern Aleppo because they've been bombed by airstrikes.
Now, Syria has called for an international probe into the use of chemical weapons by foreign-backed militants in the flashpoint city of Aleppo and elsewhere in the country. The Foreign Ministry has sent 2 identical letters to the United Nations Secretary General and the Security Council President highlighting the use of toxic gases, including chlorine, in Aleppo. It has demanded the Hague-based Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW, send experts to investigate the incidents in the letters. The Syrian ministry, however, criticized the UN and the OPCW, paying no attention to the crimes committed against terrorist groups. Earlier this week, terrorists in eastern Aleppo fired mortar shells containing chlorine, causing scores of injuries among civilians and military personnel. The Russian military has found traces of chemical agents and toxic gas cylinders during a search operation in the southwest of Aleppo. Human Rights Watch says a mass grave has been found in the newly liberated Iraqi town of Hammam al-Alil. The grave contains the bodies of an estimated 300 local police officers. The HRW says the victims were most probably buried by Daesh terrorists who were in control of the town before it was freed by Iraqi troops 3 weeks ago. Local witnesses have said Daesh terrorists used the grave to bury the security forces after shooting them to death or beheading them for not obeying Daesh commanders. The town of Hammam al-Alil lies south of the Daesh-held city of Mosul. The Iraqi army managed to liberate the town as part of the major operation to liberate Mosul.
Helicopters fire rockets at ISIL targets close to the city of Tel Afar, north of Mosul. Iranian-backed Iraqi Shia militia groups, collectively known as al-Hashid al-Sha'bi, say they are advancing to take full control of the city's airport.
We began an operation to surround the airport, and today we were able to storm it. We cleared 50% of it. Our troops are at the end of the airport, as well as the villages surrounding it.
Tel Afar is an Islamic State-held area close to Turkey. It lies on a route that ISIL fighters are expected to try and escape along into neighbouring Syria. It has a large Turkmen population. Turkey has warned it would intervene militarily if Shia forces commit atrocities in the city, and the Iraqi government is worried too. It has ordered the Shia militias not to try and take control of Tel Afar.
A U.S. brokered truce went into effect in Yemen on Thursday night and was immediately endorsed by Ansarullah movement. But forces loyal to former President Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi dismissed the deal, claiming they were not aware of any such initiative and therefore would press ahead with their military operation. Ceasefire violations have been obvious, especially in coastal areas of Al-Hudaydah and near the seaport of Maidi.
Hundreds of Palestinians have rallied in the besieged Gaza Strip following the Friday prayers to slam Tel Aviv's ban on the Muslim call to prayer. Earlier this month, Israeli police enforced a ban on the Muslim call to prayer on loudspeakers at a number of mosques in Jerusalem al-Quds. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has already backed a bill in the Israeli Knesset aimed at limiting the sound of prayer calls coming from Palestinian mosques in Jerusalem al-Quds and other Palestinian cities. Experts say Israel wants to erase the Islamic identity of Jerusalem al-Quds.
The call to prayer is the symbol of our existence, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque is one of the icons of our faith. We will continue our call to prayer despite all attempts to silence it, and we will fight for the liberation of Palestine.
World-renowned physicist Stephen Hawking has given humanity a deadline for finding a new planet to live on. The famed theoretical professor says we have 1,000 years to colonize somewhere else, warning that survival on Earth will grow too dangerous over the coming millennium. RT's Marina Portnaya bringing us the details tonight.
SpaceX has unveiled a plan to colonize Mars in the next decade, and NASA has discovered thousands of exoplanets. But world-renowned physicist Stephen Hawking says more needs to be done to save humanity. Dr. Hawking says humans have 1,000 years to find a new planet to live on or risk encountering mass extinction.